All right, welcome back to class. So this week we're going to work on the Pareto assignment. So the Pareto principle, if you've never heard of it, it's called the 80-20 rule. And it's the idea, let's say that 80% of your problems come from 20% of your sources. So let's say you're running a manufacturing operation. Chances are probably 80% of the parts that you have to throw away or that you have an issue with that aren't meeting your specs are probably caused by 20% of some source in your production process. So if you can go through and identify those 20% of the sources that are causing 80% of your problems, right? That is what you'd want to focus on to get the most positive change possible. Or let's say you run a warehouse operation. Chances are 80% of your inventory is taken up by 20% of your products. Now, if you can identify that, it might allow you to run your warehouse more efficiently. So here's the data that we've got today. There are these operator write-ups. So somebody's operating some process, some piece of equipment, and they're having some issues. And as these issues occur, these problems occur, they're recording them. And we see these issues: cannot duplicate, electrical controls, hydraulics. Well, as we look down, here's hydraulics again. Here's hydraulics. A lot of these same issues are occurring over and over. So we've got each one of these occurrences that occur in our operator write-ups accounted for right here. There are control indicators, electrical controls, electrical power, fuel, hydraulics, propulsion, and cannot duplicate. And then we've gone ahead and entered this formula. It's equals count if $A, $4 through A45, and then D4. Remember, those dollar signs are called absolute cell references. And what they do is, as you're dragging this formula down, right, if you select a cell, or even if that has a formula, even if your cell doesn't have a formula, you've got that little shaded box. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You got that little shaded box in the lower right-hand corner. When you move your cursor over it, and let me give you some cursor tips. If I select a cell and I put my cursor right in the middle of that cell and I drag it down, it's going to highlight, right? That's how I highlight cells. If I select a cell and I put my cursor over that little shaded box in the lower right-hand corner, now that big fat plus sign is going to turn into crosshairs, and that's called my autofill tool. And now if I were to drag that down, it's going to drag that formula down, or whatever. If I just have a value, if I type the number 7, select my cell, right, big fat plus sign, I'm ready to highlight. Well, I want to use my autofill tool. I'll get those crosshairs by putting my cursor over that little shaded box in the lower right-hand corner. Right now, if I drag it down, it just drags the value of 7 down. So whatever the value you have in that cell, your autofill tool will just put that same value in the cells that you drag it into. But with formulas, what tends to happen? So here we've got our count if formula. It's going to count in cells A4 through A45. It's going to count how many times cell D4, right? D4, count how many times that occurs. Well, as I drag that formula down one time, what happens to D4? As I drag down, D4 becomes D5, D6, D7, D8, D9. So as I drag it down, the row wants to change. So I've frozen all the rows and columns in my first set of cells that I want to count in, because I don't want those to change. But as I drag down, I do want D4 to become D5, D4, D5, D6, D7, D8, D9, D10. What happens if I drag a formula across instead of down? Right? When I drag it down, the number wants to change, right? The number's the row indicator. When I drag it across, the column indicator wants to change. So what's going to happen to D4 if I drag it across one cell? Well, D becomes E, right? And if I kept going, it would be F, G. But now the row doesn't change because I'm not dragging it down rows. I'm dragging it across columns. But again, I put those dollar signs in there. So A4 and A45 are fixed. They're not going to change. So now I've got each one of my occurrences counted up. Now I want to organize those from largest to smallest. So I'll highlight my information. I go to my Home tab. And in my editing menu, I've got this sort and filter tool. If you scroll over tools and just leave your cursor over there, it'll tell you what the tool does. Organize your data so it's easier to analyze, gives you a little more information. If I left click on it one time, it gives me some options. We want to sort these from largest to smallest, and it tells you it sorts from high to low value. So I'll select that option. When I do that, it asks me if I want to expand the selection or continue with the current selection. If I choose continue with current selection, it's only going to organize from largest to smallest the numbers I've highlighted. But when I organize the number 5, I want propulsion to stay in the same row, right? So if you've got data right next to what you've highlighted that you want to organize as well, you'd want to expand the current selection. And now anywhere this 3 goes, fuel will go with it. Anywhere this 8 goes, hydraulics goes with it. Anywhere this 5 goes, propulsion, right, goes in the same row. We'll keep them in the same row. So I'll choose expand the selection and hit sort. And now I've got all my number of occurrences organized from largest to smallest, and the name of my occurrence went with it. If I want to change the width of my rows, just like the sort and filter function, I can go to the Home tab, I can go to the editing menu, sort and filter. I can highlight these, right clicks always pull up menus. When you right click in different places, if I right click on this cell, I'm going to get a different menu than if I right click up here, and if I right click on something with a formula in it. Right? But I can highlight my data, right click, and I've got sort and filter tools right here. I've also got my data tab, and I can go in there, and here's sort and filter as well. There's always more than one way to do things. You don't have to do it exactly like I do it today, but you're welcome to do it however you find to be most effective. So now what I want to do is I want to get a running total. We're going to call it a cumulative. I'll spell check that in the middle. I have no idea if I've spell checked it correctly or not. Cumulative total. So as I type that in, maybe my header that I've typed in for my table that I'm going to build is hanging out of my cell. It's a little too wide. I can take my cursor up top in between the F and the G and see how it changes when I get in the middle. I can left click and hold down. I can change the width. I can also take my cursor to that same spot. I can double click. Right? And then it'll automatically change to a width that fits your data that's in that cell. You can also right click. I have to go all the way up to the F, put my cursor over that column indicator, the F or the G. I can right click. I've got column widths here. I can set my column width. So a couple different ways that you can get the width of your column the way you want. So now I want to get a cumulative total here. My cumulative total is going to be, the first one I just want to be my first number of occurrences. Right, the second one I want to be these two added together. The third one, I want these 3 added together. The fourth one, I want 4, right? So I could do this one at a time, but what we want to use Excel for is to do 2 things: to do lots of calculations quickly and to display our data in an easy to read way that makes sense and that quickly lets us get an idea of what's going on with whatever data that we're trying to process in our spreadsheet here. If we can do those 2 things by the end of the semester, we'll consider it a success. So to add these together, I can do it one at a time. Equals this first cell, right? Running total. So what do I want here? In my next cell down, I want these 2 added together. Equals E4 plus E5, enter. Equals this plus this plus. But this isn't making things faster, is it? I know what 8 plus 8 is. It's 16. I can just type in 16 plus another 8 is 24. Right? We want things to go faster. So here's a little trick for a running total. Take equal sign, take your previous total, and add in your next occurrence. And now you've got a formula that's always going to take the cell above and add in your next occurrence. And when you drag that down, use your autofill tool, right? Little shaded box, lower right-hand corner. Move your cursor over till you get your crosshairs and drag that formula down. Now it'll do that for you, right? That's a heck of a lot faster than using your calculator or even typing the values in one at a time. And again, all you do, equal sign, you reference your previous running total and add in your next occurrence. Use your autofill tool and drag it down. We can go through and do this at the end, but whenever I have numbers in my cells, I always like to home tab, alignment tool, I like to get those centered. I think it looks better. And we'll go back and format everything at the end. Now our next cell here, we're going to have our cumulative percentage. So now we want to get an idea of our running total as it moves along relative to our total number of occurrences. So I'm going to do equal sign. I'll left click on my individual occurrence and divide it by my total number of occurrences down here, and hit enter. Now I can use my autofill tool and drag it down, right? But I'm getting this issue divide by 0. Why am I getting that issue when I use my autofill tool? And how can I fix it? Well, I'm getting that issue because this cell is F4 divided by F10. As I drag it down one row, what's going to happen? Well, the rows want to change. So what's this next cell, row 5? What's it going to have in it? Well, it should have F5. Perfect, that's what we want. This was F4. Next one we want to reference is F5. But now it's going to be divided by F11, which is just an empty cell. And this will be F6, right? And you see how it's always divided by these empty cells down here. How can we fix that? Well, we want F4 to become F5, F6, F7, F8, F9, F10. So we don't want to use any of those fixed cell references for that. But we don't want F10 to become F11, F12, and on and on. So we just put a $ in front of that, and we can just drag it down. And if you've done this correctly, you should end up with 100% or 1, right? 100% in decimal form would just be 1, right? 76.1% would be 0.761 in decimal form. Well, we're calling this cumulative percentage, so let's go ahead and make it a percentage. If we go to our home tab and our number menu, we've got all these different tools that we can use to change the format of the numbers in our cell. So general format, number format, we can have them expressed as dates. Accounting format would look like that. I can have scientific notation, fractional notation. What do we want? We want percentages. Right? So I'll format them to be percentages. I don't know if I need 2 decimal places. So still there in the home tab in our number menu, I've got this tool that lets me increase and decrease my number of decimal places. I'll get it down to 1 decimal place. I mean, that's reasonable enough for us. And again, I'll center that just because I think it looks better. I can also, because my header is so much wider than my data, and what I might do is take that header and wrap the text, and again, get that centered. And why don't I just do this all together? Let's go ahead and format our table. So I want to get all my headers right centered. I'm going to wrap text for everything. I've got all my numbers centered. That looks good. My control indicators, I can see if I like that centered. Sometimes with text, I'll leave it left aligned. Sometimes I'll center it. It doesn't make a difference to me here. I'm just going to leave it left aligned. Now, as I look at my headers, they're not formatted the same. Right? This one's bold and underlined. These aren't. So I'll highlight all my headers. I'll make everything bold. I'm not going to keep the underlines. I'll turn that off. I'll get them vertically aligned. My cumulative here is cut off. I don't want that. So now I've got everything to a reasonable width here. I'll highlight everything. Again, to highlight, you want to get that big fat plus sign, left click and hold down. Right, now you can let off. As long as you don't click anything else, it won't unhighlight itself. So left click and hold down, highlight everything. Home tab, my font menu. These are my borders. I'm going to put all borders. You can see what that does. It puts a border around every cell. I'll maybe take my header. I'll put a thick box border around my header. I'll highlight my data. I'll put a thick box border around my data. Now you might want to do a little highlighting to make it even stand out a little more. And again, I'll highlight my headers, and I'll just pick a very subtle shading. There's also a faster way to do this. Let's see, insert, home tab. So I've got a little different layout here than I have when I'm using Word in the office, but I've got a table tool. Oh, here it is. Format as table. So home tab, styles menu, format as table. So I've got all these different pre-formatted sort of table layouts that I can use. I can highlight my cells that my array of cells that I want to turn into a table. Go to my table tool. I'll pick something with a little shaded header here. It'll bring up this text box, and it's telling you where is your data table, cells D3 through G10. Yep, that's where we are. My table has headers. If you already have headers typed in, right, labels for your columns and rows, then you want to do that because it will format those headers for you. So we want to make sure that's checked because we do have headers. And it'll build that table for you. right? It'll do everything that we've just done. If we had undone all our formatting, we can change it a little bit. We can change our table styles. Sometimes it's nice to have every other row highlighted, especially when you have big tables. So we could do that as well. I'd already set up the highlighting for this, so it's not changing that. But either way you want to do this is fine. I think it's important that you have a general understanding of how to build your table yourself. But then there's also this format as table tool. And when you do that, it builds in the sort feature as well into each column. So if you ever want to sort those, you're welcome to do so. I don't know. I guess it's just the way I was always used to doing those at some point in time. So I've always just kind of liked to build my own tables. Sometimes I'll highlight the first row I want, hit Control, and then highlight every other row. Right, and then I'll do some of that shading work myself. But it's up to you. Use the table tool, format tables yourself, but it's important that you understand how to present a well-formatted table. Right, all my headers here are the same, have the same font, very easy to read. I don't know if I've spelled cumulative correctly. I'll go to spell check. Looks like cumulative has one M. I'll go ahead and change all those. Now I'm ready to start building my chart. So our Pareto chart is going to be a chart that's got uses a primary and secondary axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the occurrence names on the x-axis, our number of occurrences on a primary y-axis, and our cumulative percentage is going to be plotted on a secondary y-axis. So when I'm ready to put in a chart, I go to the Insert tab, and I've got all these different charts to choose from. If you've got data highlighted before you choose your charts, Excel's going to go ahead and try to plot that. Kind of not so much intuitively going to guess what you want to put where, and it's going to build that chart for you. I want to show you the foolproof way to do it. Just make sure you have an empty cell selected. We'll go into a column chart. We'll do a 2D column chart. And I'm going to do a clustered column chart. And we can always go back and change this. So now I see if I've got whenever I click on my chart, you'll notice these new tabs pop up, chart design and format. I can right click on my chart and I can go to select data. And that'll pull up this select data source box here. This allows me to add things one at a time. If I click on my chart as well, I've got those new tabs that pop up. You can get the select data here as well. Two different ways to do the exact same thing. Click on it, it'll pull up the exact same box here. So now we've got our legend entries and our horizontal axis categories. So our legend entries are going to be y-axis, right? The vertical. And I'll put in a legend when I plot more than one thing on my y-axis, and I'll show you what a legend is here in a little bit. Then I've got my horizontal, right? Horizontal, that's going to be my x-axis. So first I want to add what I want to put in for my y-axis. I'll do series name. So this is what's going to show up in your legend. And I've got the series name right here. Now I could type that in, but I want to reference this cell that has the series name, because if I change it in my spreadsheet, I automatically want it to change in my chart. So I'm going to reference everything. Whenever you can, you want to use cell references. Then series values. If this equals parenthesis 1 doesn't highlight itself, you need to go back in and delete it, because it'll give you it'll cause an error message. And I'll just highlight, right, the data I want to plot for chart 1 and hit enter. Now we haven't told Excel, so now we've got exactly what we want on our y-axis, because we've got our number of occurrences and we've got that actual data plotted. But our x-axis is incomplete, because if you don't tell Excel what to put in there, we want to put the name of our occurrences. Excel just starts at 1 and starts counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we'll fix that in a minute. All right, our number of occurrences is plotted correctly. Now we'll edit our horizontal axis labels, right? Horizontal is our x-axis. We'll edit that. Axis label range. And I'll select the data for my occurrences. And I can hit enter or OK. It automatically puts that in there for us. Now I also want to plot my cumulative percentage. So I'm going to, on a secondary y-axis, I'll go ahead and add that. Series name. And I'll delete that because it's not highlighted. Cumulative percentage. Series values, right? Make sure that's highlighted. It'll replace itself. Hit enter. Hit OK. Again, even though it's showing up correctly, I need to go to edit horizontal axis labels. Select my occurrences. And I'll hit OK. So I've got all my data in there plotted correctly, but it's really not showing up quite the way I want. Because here with my cumulative percentage, what's 100% really plot as? Well, it plots as 1. 95.2%, what's it plot as? Plots as 0.952. So these really whole numbers and percentages shouldn't be plotted on the same scale. If it was whole numbers or large numbers that were in the hundreds and thousands, and we had these numbers, 8, 5, 3, 2, we wouldn't want to plot those on the same scale either because you can't hardly see them. So what we want to do is we want to keep this blue series plotted on a primary y-axis. We want to take this orange series, which is our cumulative percentage, and plot it on a secondary y-axis. So I will put my cursor right over that orange series and right-click. I will go to Change Series Chart Type. That'll open up this dialog box for us. We can change the type of chart that we have. Right, it shows me all my different series that are plotted down here. I want to move my cumulative percentage, my orange series, to a secondary axis. And then I'm going to change it from a clustered column chart. I'm going to change it to a line chart. And as you're going along, it'll show you what your changes are going to look like once they're implemented. And this is exactly what I want. So I'll hit OK. Now one more time, all you have to do, put your cursor over one of your series, right click. Remember, right clicks always pull up menus. When you right click in different locations, you pull up different menus. I go to Change Series Chart Type. Right, and that's when I get that option to move that to its own axis and to change the type of chart. Well, we've got just what we want here, so I'm going to leave it alone. The only thing we need to do now is to format the chart. Anytime you submit a chart for the rest of the semester, it should have a chart title. It should have y-axis titles. We have 2 y-axes, so we'll have 2 y-axis titles, an x-axis title. And if we've got more than one thing plotted on the y-axis, we want to have a legend. So let's go ahead and do that first. If I click on the area of my chart, I've got those new tabs that pop up here. I also get some of these quick tools here. And here I've got this plus sign. This is my chart elements. It'll let me put in axis titles, right? It puts in a title for each axis I have, a chart title, and a legend. So that's everything I'd need. Now I just need to actually put in the chart title, axis titles. Right? I want to format this a little bit. Here my legends is taking up so much room. I might move it around somewhere. Maybe move it down here somewhere where I can hide it. Try to get my chart to be as big as I can, big as it can. Maybe you don't like the way that looks. Maybe I don't even like the way it looks that much, but it does the job, and we're just going to try to kind of keep it out of the way. So for axis title down here, for this one, this will be my occurrences, chart title, and you don't have to use what I'm doing. Call it Pareto chart. This axis title, I've got I'll just put my number of occurrences. Cumulative percentage here. So now I've got chart title. I've got all my axis titles. I've got my legend. Remember, there's always more than one way to do things. I also could have gone into my chart design. Here I've got chart elements, options for axis titles, options for chart titles. This might be nice for the legend because the legend, it will put it in different locations for you, in kind of different formats. So I could do that. I could move my chart title here a little bit. I don't know, it might look better the way I did it the first time. Or we can leave it like that, however you want to. Maybe move this up a little bit too. And these text boxes are just like the text boxes we did in Word. You can move them around wherever you want them. All right, we'll leave it like that. So now the last thing we need to do, and maybe we'll do two more things, but we want our axis range to fit our data. Here our data fits at 9, or stops at 8, and our chart here goes up to 9, or our primary y-axis data range goes to 9. So I'll put my cursor right over that primary y-axis and right-click. I'll go to Format Axis. Here I've got my boundaries, minimum 0, maximum 9. I'll just change that 9 to an 8. Now that data fits my axis perfectly. For my cumulative percentage, it goes up to 100%, which is really, right, 1. Well, here my range goes to 120. And I'll put my cursor right over that axis and right click. I'll go to Format Axis. My boundaries are 0 to 1.2. Well, 100% is really 1, right? Change that. Maybe I'll format that axis again. Those numbers are so close to each other. I might try to get it so it only shows me every 20%. Let's see what that looks like. You don't have to do that. Now it's not quite as crowded. Here's 100%, 80%, right in here somewhere. So 0, 20. So now what I'd want to do, or one more thing you can do, go to Insert. I want to find my shapes. Where are my shapes at here? So if I go to my illustration here, shapes, I can just pick a straight line, you know, and right at about that 80% point here, I'll draw a line over until I hit my Pareto chart. Try to level it out a little bit. If I click on that line, just like when I click on my chart, I get some new options. Just kind of play around with these a little bit. My weight, I want that to be a little thicker for sure so we can really see it. Maybe change the color as well. Do a blue one, we already got a lot of blue. I'll maybe do green. Now here's the idea. I draw my line across here at 80%, and what's my Pareto chart? Once I hit my Pareto chart, what I want to do is, so I think 80% is actually a little lower. It'll tell you when you hit the line if you're at 80%. I don't think it's right at the. So as we're right about there, 80% of our problems come from, I think it's actually a little higher here. Maybe it is right at the line. So if I draw my line across here at 80% and see where I hit my cumulative curve, that tells me where 80% of my problems are occurring. So if I was trying to improve this process, I wouldn't really want to focus on cannot duplicate fuel or propulsion issues. To eliminate the bulk of my problems, I'd want to focus on hydraulics, electrical power, electrical controls, and control indicators, because that's where the majority of my problems are coming from. So this is how you build a well-formatted table. This is how you build a well-formatted chart. Make sure you understand these basic concepts. Make sure you understand how to put together a chart. You should always include chart title, right? Y and X-axis labels. If you plot multiple things on the Y-axis, make sure you have your legend. There's a quicker way to make charts like this too. You can go to the Insert tab again. Pick the kind of chart you want. Before you do that, excuse me. If you select some of your data, so what do I want to put in my chart? This is what I want for my X-axis. Now I'll hit the control button and I'll hold that down while I select other things. Everything else should get plotted on the Y-axis once I hold my control button. Right? Once I've selected that or highlighted that data, now I can go to the Insert tab and Excel is going to try to put it in for me. Okay? And that's basically about where we started out anyway in the beginning. We can also go to recommended charts. And as I scroll through the recommended charts, here's a bar and a line chart. But you see that's still not as complete, you know, even though the data's in there, it's still not as complete as we want it. Our series names aren't there, so we'd need to put those in for our legend. We'd still have to format this to go to our secondary Y-axis. So you still need to understand how to control or right-click, go to select data. And then for series 1, we would edit. Right, we'd put in the series name, the values are correct. Right, you'll notice that automatically updates the chart when you do that. For series 2, we do the same thing. Edit, cumulative percentage. Sometimes that works really well, highlighting your data first. Sometimes it doesn't work very well at all. That's why, regardless of if you take that shortcut or not, you need to be able to right click, go to select data, add your series, enter your series, remove series, and then edit your x-axis. So the last thing you need to do for this assignment is to name your file. So if we go back into eLearn and we go into the assignment, each assignment itself has a naming convention. We'll go into our content. The Pareto analysis is supposed to be named last name, first initial, Pareto analysis, capitalized just like this. A lot of times I think it's easiest just to go in, and if you highlight the naming convention and copy it, I'll go back into the Excel file, do File, Save As. I'll choose my location to save it. I'll just save it to my desktop here. Now I'll go to File Name. I'll just paste that new naming convention right in there. Now all I've got to do is add my last name and first initial. I can choose the type of file. Right, if I choose this first one, Excel workbook, it's going to show up as a .xlsx. That means it's saving it as the newest version of the software. Right, if I save it as this older version, it'll show up as a .xls, which means it's an older version of the software. Newer versions can open up older versions. Older versions can't open up newer versions. So make sure you understand that difference. Now when I save it, at the very top of my document, you can see the correct naming conventions in there. And that's it. So here's what I recommend. I recommend going through once and watching the video with me and doing the assignment. Once you're able to replicate exactly what I've done, go back in again and try to do it from scratch by yourself. It's very important that you understand how to display your table using tables, well-formatted, easy-to-read tables, and with your data. With your charts. So well-formatted, easy-to-read charts. And we'll see how important that is in some of our other assignments. So please let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to call or email. And thanks for tuning in.